My golden brother ruined my life. When we grew up, I became successful and had to help my loser brother find a job and lend him money. Hi Reddit, I've been a lurker here for a while, but today I need to get this off my chest. It's about my relationship with my brother, Travis. Or more accurately, the lack of one. I'm Jacob, 38 years old, married, and I have 2 kids. My life is stable. It's not perfect, but it's the kind of life I've worked hard to build. Travis, my younger brother, is 35 and is the opposite of me in almost every way. Growing up, Travis was always the wild one. He was the kid who'd climb onto the roof just to scare our mom or set up a prank that ruined Dad's tool shed. Meanwhile, I was the one cleaning up after him, literally and figuratively. Our parents didn't help the situation. Whenever Travis would pull one of his stunts, they'd just shake their heads and say, "Oh, Jacob, be wiser. He's younger. He doesn't know better." This dynamic set the tone for our relationship. Travis could do whatever he wanted, and I was expected to be the responsible one who kept things together. One incident stands out to this day. I was about 12, and Travis was 9. We had this old treehouse in the backyard that Dad built years ago. One summer, Travis thought it'd be funny to take my school project, a hand-built model of a volcano, and erupt it in the treehouse. By erupt, I mean he filled it with soda and Mentos, causing an explosion of sticky red liquid that stained everything, including my notes. I'd spent weeks on that project, and it was due the next day. I was furious, but when I ran to Mom and Dad, they just said, "Travis was just being creative. Why don't you rebuild it, Jacob? You're good at that." I ended up staying up all night trying to salvage the project while Travis slept soundly in his bed. As we got older, our differences only grew. I worked hard in school, got a scholarship, and eventually became a mechanical engineer. Travis, on the other hand, dropped out of community college after a year, saying it wasn't his thing. He bounced from one dead-end job to another, always quitting or getting fired because, as he puts it, authority isn't for me. The thing is, I've tried to help him. When he was 25, I got him a job at my friend's auto repair shop. Travis lasted 3 weeks before he got into a screaming match with the manager and quit. When I confronted him, he just shrugged and said, "They didn't respect me." But it's not just his work ethic, or lack thereof, that's the problem. Travis has a knack for getting into trouble. Over the years, I've bailed him out of everything from speeding tickets to debt collectors. Each time, he promises to change, and each time, he finds a new way to screw up. The most recent incident happened 2 weeks ago, and honestly, I think it's the straw that broke the camel's back. Travis showed up at my house unannounced, which isn't unusual for him. What was unusual was the fact that he had a black eye and looked like he hadn't showered in days. "Jake, I need your help," he said, standing in my doorway. My wife, Emma, gave me a look that said, "Not again." Travis told me he'd been staying with a friend who kicked him out after a fight. He wouldn't say what the fight was about, but knowing Travis, it could have been anything. He needed a place to crash, just for a couple of nights. Against my better judgment, I let him stay. By the second night, he'd already caused problems. My son, Liam, who's 10, came to me complaining that Uncle Travis had taken his Nintendo Switch without asking. When I confronted Travis, he brushed it off, saying, "I was bored." "Relax, I didn't break it." The real blow-up happened 3 days later. I came home from work to find Emma sitting on the couch, fuming. Apparently, Travis had borrowed her car without asking and returned it with a dented fender. When I confronted him, he tried to play it off as no big deal. "It's just a car, Jake. Why are you so uptight?" he said, grinning like it was all a joke. That was it. I told him to pack his stuff and leave. He tried to argue, but I wasn't having it. "Travis, I've spent my whole life cleaning up after you. I'm done. Find someone else to take care of you," I said. Since then, I've been dealing with a mix of anger and guilt. My parents called me after Travis told them I'd kicked him out. They weren't happy. Mom said I was being too harsh and that family is family. I reminded her of all the times I'd bailed Travis out, and she just said, "Well, he's your brother. He needs you." But does he? At what point am I allowed to say enough is enough? I have my own family to think about. My kids don't need to see their uncle treating our house like a free-for-all, and Emma certainly doesn't deserve the stress. I've been reflecting on our childhood a lot lately, wondering if things could have been different. Maybe if our parents had held Travis accountable, he wouldn't have turned out this way. Or maybe it's just who he is. Either way, I'm tired of being the one who always has to pick up the pieces. A couple of months ago, I got the kind of news that makes all the hard work worth it. After years of grinding at the same company, my boss called me into his office and handed me the promotion I'd been chasing since the day I started. It came with a significant raise, enough to make life a lot more comfortable for me, Emma, and the kids. For the first time, I didn't feel like we were just getting by. We could breathe a little easier. Of course, as soon as word got around, Travis found out. I'd barely had time to celebrate before he came knocking. Literally. It was a Saturday afternoon. Emma and I had just finished talking about what we'd do with the extra money. Some upgrades to the house, starting a college fund for the kids, when the doorbell rang. I opened the door, and there was Travis, looking like he hadn't slept in days. "Hey, Jake," he said, walking past me into the living room without waiting for an invitation. Emma shot me a look, but she didn't say anything. She knew better than to get between me and Travis when he was like this. "What's going on, Travis?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. He flopped down onto the couch like he owned the place. "I need your help," he said. I should have seen it coming. It's always the same story with him. This time, he'd lost his job. He was vague about the details, but I've heard enough of these stories to fill in the blanks. Missed deadlines, arguments with his boss, showing up late or not at all. Classic Travis. "Man, they were out to get me from day one," he said, shaking his head. "I swear, they're all just a bunch of uptight assholes. Travis, you've had, what, 6 jobs in the past 2 years?" I said, "Maybe it's not them." He ignored me and launched into his next sob story. He was behind on rent, his car was about to be repossessed, and to top it off, he had over $15,000 in credit card debt. He'd been using one card to pay off another, and now the whole thing had caught up with him. "I just need a little help to get back on my feet," he said. $5,000 should cover most of it. I can pay you back in a couple of months, tops." I almost laughed. Travis has never paid anyone back in his life. "Travis, no. I can't do that," I said. His face fell. "Come on, Jake. You just got that big promotion, right? $5,000 is nothing to you now." "That's not the point," I said. "Emma and I have plans for that money. It's for the kids, for the house. I'm not going to throw it away on your debts." "Throw it away? Jesus, Jake, I'm your brother." The argument escalated from there. He called me selfish, said I didn't care about family, and accused me of thinking I was better than him just because I have a steady job and a house. Emma finally stepped in. "Travis, you need to leave," she said firmly. He looked at her like she'd just slapped him. "Wow, okay. So that's how it is? Fine. I'll go. But don't come crying to me when you need help one day." I didn't even bother responding. I just opened the door and waited for him to leave. The next day, I got a call from my mom. "Jacob, why are you being so hard on your brother?" she asked, her voice dripping with disapproval. "Mom, he wanted me to give him $5,000 to pay off his credit card debt," I said. "And? You can afford it, can't you?" "That's not the point," I said. "He's never going to change if we keep bailing him out." Mom sighed. "Jacob, he's your brother. Family helps family." I could feel my blood pressure rising. This has been the pattern my whole life. Travis screws up, and I'm expected to fix it. No one ever holds him accountable, and I'm tired of it. A few days later, I got another surprise. My coworker Sarah pulled me aside at work. "Hey, Jacob, I hate to bring this up, but your brother came by the office yesterday." My stomach dropped. "What?" "He said he was looking for you. He told the receptionist you'd asked him to pick something up, but when she said you weren't in, he started asking about your salary." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Travis had actually come to my workplace to snoop around. Did he cause any trouble? I asked. "No, but it was weird," Sarah said. "I thought you should know." When I confronted Travis about it, he didn't even try to deny it. "I was just trying to see if you were telling the truth about the promotion," he said. "What the hell, Travis? Do you think I'd lie about that?" "I don't know, Jake. Maybe you just didn't want to help me out." That was the last straw. I told him I was done. No more bailouts, no more second chances. Of course, He didn't take it well. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him, and I haven't heard from him since. Part of me feels guilty, but another part feels relieved. For once, I'm not the one cleaning up his mess. But I know this isn't over. With Travis, it never is. You'd think after the last disaster with Travis, I'd have learned my lesson. But no, I gave him another chance. I'm a sucker for family, I guess, and he knows how to exploit that better than anyone. This time, though, he didn't just make a mess. He sabotaged my career and left me questioning why I've let him stay in my life for so long. It started a few months ago. I had been working on a major project at work for weeks. It was a presentation for a new client that could bring in a multi-million-dollar contract for the company. Landing this deal would have been a huge boost not only for my career but also for the entire team. I was pulling late nights, perfecting every slide, every data point, and every detail. The night before the presentation, Travis showed up at my house again. I should have turned him away at the door, but he had this way of making himself seem desperate. He'd been kicked out of his girlfriend's apartment after what he called a misunderstanding. "Jake, I really need a place to crash. Just for a few nights," he said, his voice low like he was ashamed to even ask. Emma was in the kitchen, overhearing everything. She gave me a look that clearly said, "Don't do this," but I caved. "Fine," I said. "The couch is yours for a couple of nights. But don't touch anything, and don't cause any trouble. I have a huge presentation tomorrow, and I can't afford distractions." He nodded eagerly. "Of course, Jake. I'll stay out of the way. Hey, maybe I can help you with your presentation. I'm great with PowerPoint." I didn't want his help, but he was already hovering over my laptop. Against my better judgment, I let him look through the slides while I printed out the materials. He made a few suggestions, none of which were remotely useful, but at least he seemed harmless. The next morning, I woke up early to prepare. Travis was lounging on the couch, scrolling through his phone, but as I gathered my materials, he suddenly jumped up. "Hey, let me grab you some coffee. Least I can do after you let me stay here," he said. "Sure," I said, not really paying attention. I was too focused on rehearsing my opening lines. A few minutes later, he came back with a steaming cup of coffee. I reached for it, but before I could grab it, he tripped. Whether accidentally or on purpose, I'll never know, and spilled the entire cup all over my presentation materials. "Oh, shit. Jake, I'm so sorry," he exclaimed, grabbing a towel to clean up the mess. I stared at the ruined papers, my heart sinking. "Are you kidding me, Travis? This is everything. The client's going to be here in 2 hours." He kept apologizing, but it didn't feel genuine. I rushed to reprint everything, but the damage was done. I barely made it to the meeting on time, and I was so frazzled that the presentation didn't go as smoothly as I'd hoped. We didn't land the contract. At first, I thought it was just another case of Travis being careless. But then I started hearing rumors at work, whispers that I'd been bad-mouthing my coworkers to the client. "Hey, Jacob, is it true you told the client that Sarah's department isn't pulling their weight?" My colleague Matt asked me in the break room. "What? No, I never said that," I replied, stunned. "Well, someone told them," he said, giving me a skeptical look. The rumors spread like wildfire. My boss called me into his office to address the situation, and I had to spend hours defending myself and trying to repair the damage to my reputation. It wasn't until a week later that I found out the truth. Sarah, one of my coworkers, mentioned seeing Travis talking to the receptionist the morning of the presentation. He'd apparently been chatting up everyone in the office, dropping little comments about me being under a lot of stress and maybe saying things he didn't mean. When I confronted Travis about it, he denied everything at first. But after some pressing, he admitted that he'd been trying to help by giving the impression that I was overworked and needed more support. "Jesus, Travis, do you even hear yourself? You nearly got me fired," I shouted. He rolled his eyes. "Come on, Jake. You're overreacting. I was just trying to make you look like the underdog. People love that." I kicked him out that night, but the story doesn't end there. A few days later, I got a call from Emma while I was at work. "You won't believe this," she said, her voice tight with anger. "Travis just posted pictures of himself in Las Vegas. With a woman." "What?" I checked his social media, and there it was. A series of photos of Travis at a casino, laughing with a woman I didn't recognize. They were drinking, gambling, and living it up. It didn't take long to figure out what had happened. The money he'd been begging for to pay off his debts? That was for this trip. I was furious. I called him immediately, and for once, he actually answered. What the hell, Travis? You lied to me about needing money to pay off your debts so you could go to Vegas? Relax, Jake. It's not like I actually got the money from you, he said, laughing like it was all a big joke. That's not the point. Do you have any idea what you've done? He didn't. Or maybe he just didn't care. I hung up on him and blocked his number. For the first time in my life, I felt like I'd truly reached my limit with him. Emma was right there to support me, but I could tell she was relieved. He's toxic, Jake. He's been dragging you down for years. It's time to let him go. She's right. I know she's right. But it's not that simple. Travis isn't just some acquaintance I can cut out of my life. He's my brother. And no matter how much damage he causes, there's a part of me that still feels responsible for him. Now I'm left wondering if I'll ever be free of him, or if I even want to be. What would you do? Would you keep giving someone like Travis chances? Or is there a point where you just have to walk away? After cutting Travis out of my life, I felt a strange combination of relief and dread. Relief because I'd finally stood up for myself and drawn a line. Dread because I knew my family wasn't going to let it go that easily. And sure enough, it didn't take long for the fallout to begin. It started with a call from my mom. I was sitting in the kitchen, going over bills with Emma, when my phone buzzed. I didn't need to look at the screen to know it was her. Jacob, we need to talk, she said, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. I sighed, bracing myself. About what, Mom? About Travis. He told me everything. You threw him out when he needed you most. He's your brother, Jacob. How could you do that to him? I rubbed my temples, trying to stay calm. Mom, he's been lying to me for years. He sabotaged my work, spread rumors about me, and lied about why he needed money. He's not some victim. That's not what he told me, she shot back. He said you've been treating him like dirt ever since your promotion. He said you're jealous because he's trying to turn his life around. Jealous? Are you serious? Mom, he used the money he begged for to take a vacation to Las Vegas with his girlfriend. He's not trying to turn his life around. He's using everyone around him. Jacob, he's family. Family sticks together, she said, her voice softening. You know your father and I didn't raise you to turn your back on your brother. I couldn't help but laugh, but it wasn't a happy laugh. You and Dad also didn't raise Travis to be a manipulative liar, but here we are. She didn't like that. She muttered something about me being ungrateful and hung up. I thought that was the end of it, but I should have known better. A few days later, my dad called. Same argument, different voice. You're letting this promotion go to your head, son. You're forgetting what it means to be part of a family, he said. Dad, this has nothing to do with my promotion. Travis has been a problem for years. You've just never wanted to see it. Well, maybe if you weren't so high and mighty, he wouldn't feel like he has to go behind your back to get anything done, Dad said. I hung up on him. It was the first time in my life I'd ever done that to either of my parents, but I couldn't take it anymore. Emma supported me, of course. She always does. But the strain was starting to show. Even the kids could tell something was wrong. Then Travis took things to a whole new level. He started posting on social media, painting himself as the victim. He posted pictures of himself looking miserable, accompanied by captions like, "When your own family abandons you in your darkest hour," and "I guess money really does change people." He didn't mention my name, but it was obvious who he was talking about. The posts blew up. People started commenting, offering their sympathy, and telling him how awful it was that his family had turned their backs on him. Some even reached out to me directly, demanding to know how I could treat my brother so poorly. It was humiliating. What Travis didn't count on was his own girlfriend, Alyssa, turning against him. I didn't know much about her before this. She was relatively new in his life, but apparently she'd seen enough. She messaged me out of the blue one evening. Hey, Jacob, I know we don't know each other well, but I wanted to say I'm sorry for what Travis has done to you. I had no idea he was lying about the money until I saw the Vegas photos. I didn't know what to say at first. I thanked her for reaching out and asked her what else she knew. He told me he needed the money to pay off his debts, but when I pressed him, he admitted he wanted to use it for our trip. I thought it was a little shady, but he said you wouldn't miss it because you're rich now. Rich. That word stung. I'm not rich. I'm comfortable because I've worked my ass off for years, and even then, it's not like I'm rolling in money. But Travis has always seen me that way, as his personal bank account. Alyssa didn't stop there. She also started commenting on Travis's posts, calling him out on his lies. She didn't hold back, either. She told everyone exactly what he'd done, from the fake sob stories to the sabotage at my workplace. At first, Travis tried to deny it, but when more people, including some of our relatives, started siding with Alyssa, he deleted the posts. That's when the tide started to turn. My cousin Mark, who I hadn't spoken to in years, reached out to me. Hey Jake, I saw the drama on Facebook. I just want you to know I've been there. Travis borrowed $2,000 from me last year and never paid it back. You're doing the right thing by cutting him off. It was a small comfort, but it helped. More relatives started coming forward with their own stories about Travis. My Aunt Karen told me he'd borrowed her car once and returned it with an empty tank and a broken taillight. My Uncle Mike said Travis had tried to sell him a business opportunity that turned out to be a pyramid scheme. Even my parents started to waver. When they found out about the Vegas trip, they couldn't ignore the truth any longer. Mom called me again, but this time her tone was different. Jacob, I'm sorry. I didn't know about the trip. Travis didn't tell us any of that, she said. I've been trying to tell you for years, Mom. He's not who you think he is, I said. She sighed. I just don't know what to do anymore. He's my son. I can't just give up on him. I'm not asking you to give up on him, I said. I'm just asking you to stop enabling him. He's never going to change if you keep letting him get away with everything. I don't know if she'll ever really listen to me, but for now, things are quiet. Travis hasn't tried to contact me since Alyssa exposed him, and I haven't heard from my parents in a few days. I'm not sure what's going to happen next, but for the first time in a long time, I feel like I can breathe again. The question that keeps me up at night, though, is whether any of this will stick. Will Travis finally learn his lesson? Or is this just another chapter in the never-ending saga of cleaning up his messes? Only time will tell. When I finally made the decision to cut Travis out of my life for good, it wasn't a dramatic moment. There were no shouting matches, no ultimatums. It was quiet, almost anticlimactic, a deep, steady realization that I couldn't keep living like this. After years of being dragged through the mud, manipulated, and guilt-tripped, I was done. It started with a final request from Travis. This time, it wasn't just a loan. It was a plea. He called me late one evening, his voice a mixture of desperation and entitlement. Jake, I need this. I swear it's the last time. 5,000, just enough to get the collectors off my back. After that, I'm going to start fresh, he said. I'd heard this promise too many times before. He always said it was the last time, and it never was. I could hear Emma in the other room, reading to the kids, her voice calm and steady. That's what I wanted my life to be, calm, steady. Not this constant cycle of chaos and damage control. No, Travis. I can't do this anymore, I said. What do you mean you can't? You're my brother, he snapped. I mean, I've given you chance after chance, and you've blown every single one. You don't want help, Travis. You want someone to fix everything for you. And I'm not doing it anymore. He started yelling, calling me selfish, accusing me of turning my back on family. I hung up. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty about it. The next day, Emma sat me down. She'd been watching me carry this burden for years, and I think she knew I was finally ready to deal with it. You should talk to someone, she said. A professional. You've been through a lot, and it's not just about Travis. It's your whole family dynamic. You need to process it. I was skeptical at first. Therapy seemed like admitting defeat, like saying I couldn't handle my own problems. But Emma convinced me, and a week later, I found myself sitting in a small, cozy office across from Dr. Lauren Campbell, a therapist with kind eyes and an air of quiet authority. She asked why I had come. At first, I hesitated, unsure where to start. It's my brother, Travis, and my parents, and I don't know, my whole family, I guess. Over the next few sessions, I laid everything out. The years of cleaning up after Travis, the constant guilt trips from my parents, the way I'd always been expected to be the responsible one. Dr. Campbell listened without judgment, occasionally asking questions that made me think harder than I wanted to. "Why do you think you kept bailing him out, even when you knew it wouldn't change anything?" she asked during one session. "Because I felt like I had to," I said, "like it was my job. If I didn't do it, no one else would." She nodded. "And what about your parents? How do they fit into that?" I hadn't really thought about it in those terms before, but the answer was obvious. They always made excuses for him. They told me to be wiser, to be the bigger person. They never held him accountable, so I felt like I had to. That realization hit me like a ton of bricks. For years, I'd been carrying not just the weight of Travis's mistakes, but the expectations my parents had placed on me. They'd conditioned me to believe it was my responsibility to keep everything together, no matter the cost to myself. Another time, Dr. Campbell asked, "What would happen if you set boundaries with your parents? If you told them what you're willing to tolerate and what you're not?" The thought terrified me. I don't know. They'd probably be upset. They'd say I'm abandoning the family. And how would that make you feel? Guilty, I admitted, but also, maybe relieved? It was a strange feeling, acknowledging that I didn't have to keep sacrificing my own well-being to please my parents. Over the weeks, I started to understand just how much damage that dynamic had done to me. I wasn't just angry at Travis. I was angry at them for enabling him and for putting so much pressure on me. Emma noticed the change almost immediately. One evening, as we were getting ready for bed, she said, "You seem lighter lately, like a weight's been lifted." I smiled. I think I'm finally starting to figure things out. The next time my parents called to guilt-trip me about Travis, I was ready. Mom launched into her usual spiel about family and loyalty, but I cut her off. "Mom, I love you, but I'm not doing this anymore. Travis is not my responsibility, and I'm not going to keep sacrificing my own happiness to bail him out." She was stunned. "Jacob, how can you say that? He's your brother." "Yes, and he's an adult. He's made his choices, and now he has to deal with the consequences. I'm done cleaning up his messes." She started crying, which would have broken me in the past. But this time, I stood firm. "I'm sorry if this hurts you, Mom, but it's what I need to do for my own sanity." After that, I limited my contact with them. I didn't cut them off entirely, but I only spoke to them on my terms. If they brought up Travis, I ended the conversation. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Emma and I also made a point to focus on our own family. We started going on more outings with the kids, trips to the park, movie nights, things that reminded me of what I was fighting for. Slowly but surely, I started to feel like myself again. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own life. I wasn't living in Travis's shadow or under my parents' expectations. I was free, and I wasn't going back. When I finally cut off contact with Travis, I felt like a chapter of my life had closed. But for Travis, things were just beginning to unravel. The consequences of his actions were finally catching up with him, and this time, there was no one left to bail him out. The first major fallout was with Alyssa, his girlfriend. After her public comments on social media exposing his lies, their relationship deteriorated fast. It wasn't just about the Vegas trip or the money. It was about trust. Travis had burned that bridge one too many times. I heard about their breakup from my cousin Mark, who'd stayed somewhat in the loop with Travis's antics. Apparently, she packed up her stuff and left while he was out one night. Mark told me over a beer. She didn't even say goodbye, just texted him that she was done. Alyssa wasn't the only one pulling away. After the drama exploded on social media, Travis started losing friends. People who had been willing to overlook his behavior in the past began distancing themselves. Some blocked him entirely. Others simply stopped responding to his messages. It seemed like everyone was finally seeing him for who he really was. With no girlfriend and few friends left, Travis turned his attention to finding a job, or at least pretending to. I got wind of his attempts through my parents, who were still trying to salvage their relationship with him despite everything. "He's been applying everywhere," Mom said during one of our rare phone calls. "But you know how tough the job market is these days." I knew better. Travis wasn't struggling because of the job market. He was struggling because of his reputation. In our town, word travels fast and employers talk. I wouldn't be surprised if his history of missed deadlines and unprofessional behavior had already made the rounds. One day, I ran into an old coworker, Rachel, at the grocery store. She mentioned that Travis had applied for a position at her company. "We didn't even get to the interview stage," she said, shaking her head. "He didn't bother filling out half the application, and the references he listed? Two of them outright told us not to hire him." I wasn't shocked. Travis had always relied on charm to get by, but charm doesn't work when your track record speaks for itself. With no job and no place to stay, Travis had no choice but to move back in with our parents. I'll admit, part of me felt a twisted sense of vindication when I found out. For years, they defended him, excused his behavior, and shifted the blame onto everyone else. Now, they were getting a front-row seat to the reality of who Travis had become. At first, Mom and Dad tried to make it work. They cleared out the guest room and welcomed him back like the prodigal son. But it didn't take long for the cracks to show. "He's always in his room," Dad complained during a brief phone call. "He doesn't clean up after himself. He doesn't contribute. He just sits there on his phone all day." For the first time, they started setting boundaries. Dad told him he'd have to contribute to household expenses if he wanted to stay. At first, Travis laughed it off. "Come on, Dad. I'm your son. You're seriously going to charge me rent?" he said. But Dad didn't budge. "You're 35 years old, Travis. It's time you started acting like it." That was when the fights began. Mom called me one evening, her voice trembling with frustration. "He's impossible, Jacob. Every time we try to talk to him about responsibility, he blows up. He says we're treating him like a child." I bit my tongue to keep from saying, "That's because he's acting like one." Travis's go-to strategy, whenever he hit a wall, was to manipulate those around him. In the past, it had worked like a charm. He'd play the victim, tugging on heartstrings until someone swooped in to save him. But now, with his lies exposed and his reputation in tatters, those tactics weren't working anymore. He tried to guilt-trip our parents, reminding them of the family values they'd always preached. But even Mom, who had spent decades defending him, wasn't falling for it anymore. "Travis, we love you. But love doesn't mean enabling you," she told him during one argument. "You need to take responsibility for your life." When he realized he wasn't getting anywhere with them, he turned his attention to our extended family. He started calling aunts, uncles, and cousins, spinning sob stories about how he'd been abandoned. Most of them didn't buy it. Alyssa's public revelations had done serious damage to his credibility. The few relatives who did take his side quickly changed their tune after dealing with him directly. My Aunt Linda, who's known for having a big heart, agreed to loan him $500 on the condition that he use it to pay off his debts. Instead, he spent it on a new gaming console. He didn't even try to hide it, Linda told me later, furious. I walked into his room, and there it was, still in the box. When I confronted him, he said, "I needed something to take my mind off the stress. I'll never trust him again." The turning point came when Travis hit rock bottom. Without a steady income, he couldn't contribute to household expenses, and my parents started to lose patience. They gave him an ultimatum: get a job within 3 months or move out. For once, Travis seemed to take them seriously. He started applying for jobs more earnestly, even taking a few interviews. But his reputation was so tarnished that no one wanted to take a chance on him. After 3 months, he was still unemployed. Mom and Dad, true to their word, told him he had to leave. It was the first time they'd ever followed through on a boundary with him, and it hit him hard. "Where am I supposed to go?" he demanded. Dad's response was blunt. "That's not our problem, Travis. You're an adult. Figure it out." As much as I'd like to say I felt sorry for him, I didn't. Travis had spent his entire life avoiding responsibility, burning bridges, and manipulating the people who cared about him. He'd always assumed there would be someone to catch him when he fell. Now, for the first time, he was realizing that safety net was gone. I still hear bits and pieces about him from mutual acquaintances. Apparently, he's staying with a friend, someone who hasn't yet learned what the rest of us already know. Part of me wonders if he'll ever change, but another part knows better. Travis has always been his own worst enemy, and unless he decides to take a long, hard look at himself, nothing's going to change. For me, though, life has moved on. I'm focusing on my family, my career, and my own happiness. Cutting Travis out of my life was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made, but it was also one of the best. Sometimes, you have to let go of the people who hurt you, even if they're family. After cutting Travis out of my life, I didn't just feel lighter, I felt free. For years, I'd been tied to his chaos, constantly cleaning up his messes and managing the fallout of his actions. Now, for the first time, my life was my own. The effects of that decision rippled through every aspect of my life, from my career to my personal relationships. A few months after the final confrontation with Travis, my boss, Greg, called me into his office. Greg wasn't the type to mince words, so when he asked me to sit down, I knew something big was coming. "Jacob, I'll get straight to the point," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Your work on the Peterson account was outstanding." The client was thrilled, and frankly, so were we. I nodded, trying to stay composed, though my heart was racing. "Thank you, Greg. I appreciate that." "Don't thank me yet," he said, a rare smile breaking through his usually stoic demeanor. "We've decided to promote you to senior project manager, effective immediately." For a moment, I was speechless. This wasn't just a promotion, it was validation. All the late nights, the meticulous attention to detail, the sacrifices I'd made to focus on my career. It had all paid off. "Thank you," I finally managed. "I won't let you down." The promotion came with a significant pay raise, enough to not only secure my family's future, but also give me the financial independence I'd always dreamed of. For years, I'd felt trapped by my family's expectations, particularly when it came to Travis. Now, with my new position and steady income, I realized I didn't owe anyone anything. One evening, while Emma and I were discussing how to invest the extra money, she suggested something that surprised me. "Why don't you do something for yourself?" she said. "You've worked so hard for this. You deserve to enjoy it." At first, I wasn't sure what she meant. I wasn't the type to splurge on luxuries or expensive hobbies. But then I thought about the community center near our neighborhood. I'd passed it dozens of times, but never really paid attention to what went on there. It wasn't until I saw a flyer for their youth mentorship program that something clicked. What if I volunteered there? I asked Emma. They have programs for kids and teens dealing with tough family situations. Maybe I could help. She smiled, her eyes lighting up. I think that's a wonderful idea. When I walked into the Maplewood Community Center on my first Saturday, I wasn't sure what to expect. The building was unassuming, a simple brick structure with a worn sign out front, but inside, it buzzed with energy. Kids were playing basketball in the gym. A group of teens was working on art projects, and volunteers were scattered everywhere, guiding, laughing, and encouraging. Laura, the center's director, greeted me at the door. She was a whirlwind of energy, a woman in her mid-40s with an infectious smile and an air of calm authority. "You must be Jacob," she said, shaking my hand firmly. "Thank you for joining us. Let me show you around." She led me through the center, explaining its mission and programs. "We're here for kids who don't always have a stable home life," she said. "Sometimes it's family drama, sometimes it's more serious, but the goal is the same, to give them a safe space and someone to talk to." She paired me with a group of teens who were part of the mentorship program. One of the first kids I met was Marcus, a wiry 16-year-old with a perpetual scowl and a chip on his shoulder. He slouched in his chair during our first session, barely making eye contact. "What's your deal?" he asked, his tone laced with skepticism. "I'm just here to help," I said. "You don't have to talk to me if you don't want to." He snorted. "Help? Yeah, right. What do you even know about it?" I hesitated for a moment before deciding to tell him the truth. I explained how I'd grown up cleaning up after my brother, how I'd felt trapped by my family's expectations, and how hard it had been to finally break free. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told him about the mistakes I'd made and the lessons I'd learned. To my surprise, Marcus listened. He didn't say much that first day, but the next week, he opened up a little more. He told me about his parents' constant fighting, how he felt like he had to take care of his younger siblings because no one else would. It wasn't an overnight transformation, But little by little, I saw him start to trust me. Over the weeks, I grew more comfortable in my role. The kids I worked with each had their own struggles, their own stories, and while I couldn't fix everything, I could be there for them. I could listen. And that, I realized, was more important than anything else. One afternoon, while we were cleaning up after an art project, Marcus approached me. "I got a job," he said, trying to sound casual but clearly proud of himself. "At the hardware store down the street." "That's amazing, Marcus," I said, clapping him on the shoulder. "I'm proud of you." He shrugged, but I could see the pride in his eyes. Moments like that made everything worth it. At home, Emma and I continued to build the life we'd always dreamed of. We renovated the kitchen, took the kids on a trip to the Grand Canyon, and even started planning for an early retirement. Life wasn't perfect, whose is? But it was ours, and it was good.